On the night of our 40th wedding anniversary, I decided to hide in the master bedroom's walk-in closet to surprise my husband with a special gift. But it wasn't him who ended up walking into that room first. And when that person made a call on speakerphone, what I ended up hearing in that moment left me with goosebumps. My name is Margaret Lawson. I am 62 years old. And that night, my life split into two pieces. Everything I believed in for 4 decades turned to ashes in a matter of minutes. But let me tell you from the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up hiding in my own closet, holding my breath while my world crumbled. That afternoon, I had prepared everything with such care. I bought a gold watch that cost me almost $3,000. I wrapped it in elegant paper with a silver bow. Richard, my husband, had always wanted one like that. For months he had been eyeing that model in the display cases every time we passed the jewelry store downtown. I wanted to give him that joy. I wanted to see his eyes shine like when we were younger. 40 years of marriage deserved a special celebration. At least, that is what I thought. I prepared a light dinner, put candles on the table, and fixed my hair with care. I put on that burgundy dress he liked, or at least that is what he had told me once. At 62, I still worried about looking good for my husband. I still wanted him to look at me with affection. The idea of hiding in the closet seemed romantic to me, almost youthful. I thought that when Richard came into the room after getting home from work, I would jump out with the gift in my hands and surprise him. I imagined his laugh, his hug, maybe even a kiss on the forehead like the ones he gave me when we were still affectionate with each other. How foolish I was to believe those gestures meant something real. It was almost 7 in the evening when I got into the closet. I left the door slightly ajar, just enough to be able to see toward the bed and the entrance of the room. I held the gift against my chest. My heart was beating fast, not from fear but from excitement. An excitement that now seems so absurd to me that I feel like crying for that naive Margaret who still believed in love. I heard footsteps on the stairs. I thought it was Richard. I held my breath, preparing to jump out and yell surprise. But the footsteps were different, lighter, faster. They were not the tired steps of my husband after a day of work. The bedroom door opened, and I saw Jessica enter. Jessica Miller, Richard's niece. A 35-year-old woman who had been living in our house for 2 years. She had told us she needed a temporary place while she found a job and got back on her feet. Richard insisted that we help her. I accepted because I have always been good-hearted. I have always believed in helping family. From my hiding place in the closet, I saw her walk in with confident steps, as if the room were hers. She sat on our bed, on the edge where I usually sit every night before sleeping. She took out her cell phone and dialed a number. Seconds later, she put it on speaker. I did not know whether to come out or stay still. I felt ridiculous hiding there, but something stopped me. Something in her attitude, in the way she looked around before making that call, made me remain silent. The voice that answered on the other end froze my blood. It was Richard, my husband, the man with whom I shared 40 years of my life. Jessica spoke first, and her words were like direct punches to my stomach. I am already in the room. She is downstairs preparing who knows what for tonight. She still thinks you two are going to celebrate like a happy couple. I heard Richard's laugh, a laugh I had never heard before. Cold, mocking, cruel. Let her get her hopes up. It won't be long now. In 2 months at the most, we will have everything ready, and we can end this charade. I felt the floor opening up beneath my feet. My hands began to tremble. The gift I was holding almost fell. I had to bite my lower lip hard to not make any noise. I could not believe what I was hearing. Jessica continued talking, and every word was worse than the last. I checked the documents he left in the study. The house is only in her name, but with the signature you got last week on those bank papers, we already have access to the main accounts. It is almost $250,000, more than we thought. My mind clouded over. What signature? What bank papers? I tried to remember. A week ago, Richard had asked me to sign some documents. He told me they were to renew a certificate of deposit. I trusted him. I signed without reading carefully. I signed because he was my husband. Because after 40 years, one does not expect betrayals. That money is just the beginning, said Richard with a voice I had never heard from him. She has 2 more properties she inherited from her parents. One in the city and another on the coast. Those are easily worth about $300,000 together. And there is still the business she has with her sister. There is another $100,000 in assets there. Jessica let out a short laugh. I cannot believe it was so easy. 40 years pretending, and she never suspected a thing. The world around me began to spin. 40 years pretending. Those words echoed in my head like church bells announcing a death. My death. The death of everything I believed was real. It was the plan from the beginning, replied Richard with a terrifying tranquility. When I met her, I already knew she had properties. Her family always had money. I just needed patience to earn her trust, make her believe I loved her. Silent tears began to roll down my cheeks. I pressed the gift against my chest until I felt the box buckling. $3,000 on a watch for a man who never loved me, for a man who only saw me as a source of money. And Ashley? Asked Jessica. She already knows it won't be long. Ashley. That name went through me like a hot iron. I did not know any Ashley. I had never heard that name in my life. Ashley is waiting, answered Richard. I promised her that as soon as we had everything secured, I would leave with her. She already has the apartment ready. We just need the final papers, and I will be able to get the hell out of this house forever. Jessica lowered her voice a little. But from my hiding place, I could still hear her perfectly. And what are you going to do with Margaret when you have everything? You cannot simply leave and leave her with the ability to claim or sue. There was a silence that seemed eternal to me, a heavy and threatening silence. Finally, Richard spoke, and his words finished destroying me. I already have it planned. I am going to make her sign a full power of attorney. I will tell her it is to facilitate paperwork because I am thinking of expanding my business. She will sign. She always signs what I ask her to. After that, I will convince her to donate the house to a charity foundation, something that makes her feel important. By the time she realizes she has nothing left, I will be out of the country with Ashley and the money well secured. I could not breathe. The air was not reaching my lungs. I felt nauseous. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get out of that closet and confront them, but my body would not respond. I was paralyzed by shock, by pain, by the greatest betrayal a human being can experience. You are a genius, said Jessica with admiration. 40 years of investment, but you are going to walk away with almost $500,000 clean, and she will be left with nothing, alone and ruined. She deserves it for being so naive, replied Richard with contempt. A woman of her age should know that no one marries for true love. Everything has a price. She paid the price of her loneliness with her fortune. Those words were the final blow. I closed my eyes tight. The tears would not stop now. But in the midst of that immense pain, in the middle of that total darkness, something began to awaken inside me, something I did not know I had, a strength, a cold and calculating rage. I was not going to allow them to destroy me. I was not going to allow them to get away with it. The conversation continued, and every word was like poison entering straight into my veins. Jessica kept talking with that obscene tranquility, as if they were planning a vacation and not the complete destruction of my life. When are you going to do the power of attorney thing? She asked while getting up from the bed and walking toward the window. Next week, replied Richard. I already have an appointment with the notary. I will tell Margaret I need her to accompany me for an insurance renewal procedure. She will not suspect anything. These months I have been more attentive with her, more affectionate. I have softened her up perfectly. I remembered then the last few weeks. Richard had indeed been different. He brought me flowers on Fridays. He asked me how my day had been. He hugged me from behind when I was cooking. I thought we were finally reconnecting after years of routine. I thought our marriage was entering a new stage of maturity and affection. How stupid I was. Everything was an act. Everything was part of his macabre plan. You have to admit you are a good actor, said Jessica, with a laugh. Sometimes, when I see you two together, I almost believe the role of devoted husband. 40 years perfecting the character, replied Richard with sick pride. At first, it was difficult, having to fake desire, having to share a bed with a woman who never attracted me. But the money is worth any sacrifice. And now that she is old, it is easier. I do not even have to make an effort physically anymore. With an occasional hug and some pretty words, she is satisfied. I felt like gagging. I had to cover my mouth with my hand to not vomit right there. The man with whom I shared my body, my intimacy, my nights for 40 years, felt repulsion for me. Everything had been a lie, every caress, every kiss, every time I thought we were making love. He was just tolerating me to get to my money. And she never suspected anything in all these years? Asked Jessica. Never. Margaret is one of those women who believe in eternal love and happy endings. When I met her, she was 42 years old and desperate to get married. She already felt old. She already thought she would stay alone forever. It was so easy to conquer her. I told her exactly what she wanted to hear, that she was beautiful. That age did not matter, that I was looking for a partner for life. I saw myself 20 years ago, a mature woman who had dedicated her youth to caring for her sick parents, who had sacrificed herself while her friends got married and started families. When my parents died, I found myself alone, with money but without love. And then Richard appeared. Handsome, attentive, interested in me. He made me feel young again. He made me feel desired. It was all a calculated lie from day one. You studied your victim well, commented Jessica. You knew exactly what her weak points were. Of course. Before approaching her, I investigated everything. I knew her parents had died a year ago. I knew she had inherited properties and money. I knew she had no children or partner. I knew she worked with her sister in an import business that generated good profits. She was the perfect target. Perfect target. That is what he called me. As if I were an object. As if I were not a human being with feelings, with dreams, with a heart that was now shattered into 1,000 pieces. What surprises me most is that she never discovered you with Ashley, said Jessica. You have been with her for 4 years, and Margaret never found out. 4 years. Ashley had been in Richard's life for 4 years. 4 years while I thought we had a stable marriage. 4 years of parallel deceptions. Ashley is smart, explained Richard. She knows what the plan is, and has known how to stay on the sidelines. We see each other twice a week at the apartment I rented in her name. Margaret thinks that those nights I work late, or that I have meetings with clients. She never questions anything. She is incredibly trusting. Trusting. That word that should be a virtue had become my greatest weakness. I trusted because I loved. I trusted because I believed that after 40 years together we had something real. I trusted because I never imagined anyone could be so cruel. Does Ashley know everything about Margaret? Asked Jessica. She knows what is necessary. She knows I am married for convenience. She knows there is money involved. She knows that when this is all over we will leave together to start a new life. I promised her a house on the beach, trips, the life she deserves. The life she deserves. Bought with my money. With the money my parents earned working honestly all their lives. With the money I earned with effort in the business. All to finance the life of a woman who did not even know of my existence until a moment ago. And how much does Ashley know about the details of the plan? Insisted Jessica. Only the basics. She does not need to know more. The less she knows, the better. But she is excited. She is 38 years old and wants stability. I can give her that once I liquidate everything here. 38 years old. 24 years younger than me. Of course. A 65-year-old man who never felt anything for his 62-year-old wife, but who had a much younger lover waiting. The most pathetic cliché of all. I have to admit your patience has been impressive, said Jessica. I could not have endured 40 years faking it. The time went by faster than I thought, replied Richard. The first few years were the hardest. Having to build trust, having to prove I was a good man. But once I married her and saw the real extent of her fortune, I knew it was worth waiting for the right moment. Why did you wait so long then? Asked Jessica. You could have done this years ago, because I needed everything to be perfectly aligned. I needed her to put me on bank accounts. I needed her to trust me completely. I needed her properties to increase in value, and I needed to find the perfect method to get everything out without her being able to claim legally. That takes time. He spoke of me as if I were a long-term investment project, as if my feelings, my life, my years meant absolutely nothing, just numbers, just assets to liquidate. Besides, continued Richard, while I was married to her, I had a comfortable lifestyle. Big house, good food, all expenses paid. I did not really have to work. The business I claim to have is a pure front. I just sign papers she needs. The money always came from Margaret and her family. Then I remembered all those years when Richard claimed to have important meetings. All those days he left early, supposedly to work. All those times I admired his dedication and effort. Lies. It was all lies. He lived off my money while pretending to be a hard-working man. "You are incredible," said Jessica with genuine admiration. "And here I thought my dad was smart with his business. You surpassed him completely." "Your father taught me well," replied Richard. "He was the one who gave me the idea. He told me that if I wanted real money, I had to marry someone who had it, and that if I wanted to keep it, I had to be patient and smart." Jessica's father, another name added to this disgusting conspiracy. How many people knew about this plan while I lived in my bubble of ignorance? "How much is your cut of all this?" asked Jessica suddenly. "I promised you $50,000 and you will have them," said Richard. "For your help with the documents, for keeping Margaret distracted when necessary, for being my eyes and ears inside the house. You have done a good job." $50,000. That was the price of Jessica's loyalty. That was the amount for which she betrayed the hospitality I gave her for 2 years. I welcomed her into my home. I gave her a roof and food. I treated her like family, and she sold me for $50,000. "Thanks, Uncle," said Jessica. "With that, I can finally open the business I want, and you can go with Ashley without worries." "Exactly. In 2 months, everything will be ready. The papers signed, the money transferred, the properties in the process of being sold. By the time Margaret reacts, it will be too late. She won't be able to prove anything because everything will have been done legally. She signed her own ruin herself." The tears kept falling down my face, but now they were different. They were no longer just from pain. There was something else mixed in there. Rage, indignation, a fire that was beginning to grow in my chest. "Doesn't it make you feel even a little guilty?" asked Jessica. "I mean, 40 years is a long time." Richard remained silent for a few seconds. I held my breath, waiting for his answer. "No. It does not make me feel guilty. She had 40 years of company. She had a husband who accompanied her to events, who was at family gatherings, who fulfilled the social role. That is worth something. Now it is my turn to collect for those services." Services. He called our marriage services, as if he had been an employee fulfilling a contract. "Well, I have to hang up," said Richard on the other end of the phone. "I am on my way home. I will arrive in about 20 minutes. Make sure Margaret does not suspect anything. Act normal. Relax," replied Jessica. "She is so excited about the anniversary that she does not see past her nose. A while ago, I saw her putting candles on the dining room table. She looked like a 15-year-old preparing for her first date." They both laughed. Their laughter went through me like broken glass. They were ridiculing me. They mocked my love, my illusion, my feelings. And I was still there, hiding, trembling, holding back tears so they wouldn't discover me. "Perfect," said Richard. "I am going to arrive with flowers as always. I am going to hug her. I am going to tell her something nice about these 40 years. And she will melt like she always does. She is so predictable, it is laughable." "I'll see you at dinner then," said Jessica. "I will also act my role of grateful niece. See you later." The call ended. Jessica put away her phone and left the room with the same tranquility with which she had entered, as if she had not just participated in the cruelest conversation I had ever heard in my life, as if destroying a person were something everyday and unimportant. I stayed there, motionless, in the darkness of the closet, surrounded by the clothes I had bought with my money, in the house I inherited from my parents, in the room where I had slept for 20 years, next to a stranger who pretended to love me. I do not know how much time passed. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. Time lost its meaning. Only that pain existed, so deep that I felt it was drowning me. That void so big in my chest that seemed to suck all the air from my lungs. Finally, I managed to get out of the closet. My legs barely held me up. I had to lean on the wall to not fall. The gift was still in my hands. That elegant box with the $3,000 watch I had bought with so much affection for a man who despised me. I looked at that gift and felt nauseous. I let it fall to the floor. I heard the sound of glass breaking inside the box. I did not care. None of that mattered anymore. I walked toward the vanity mirror. The woman who stared back at me was a ghost. Her makeup was runny from the tears, her eyes red and swollen. The burgundy dress I had put on to look pretty now seemed like a ridiculous costume. A 62-year-old woman trying to look attractive for a man who felt repulsion for her. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed where Jessica had sat minutes before while conspiring with my husband. I ran my hands over the comforter I had chosen myself 3 years ago. Everything in that house had my mark, my money, my effort. And Richard planned to take it all from me. I thought about going down the stairs and confronting him when he arrived. I thought about screaming everything I had heard at him. I thought about calling Jessica and demanding explanations. I thought about collapsing right there and letting the pain consume me. But I did none of that. In the midst of that abyss of suffering, something began to change inside me. It was as if a part of my brain separated from the emotional pain and began to function with coldness, with clarity, with a lucidity I had never experienced before. I was not going to confront them, not yet. Confronting them now would only give them the advantage. It would give them time to cover their tracks, to hide evidence, to prepare lies. Richard had been acting for 40 years. He would be capable of convincing me that I heard him wrong, that I misunderstood everything, that I was exaggerating, and Jessica would say the same. They would say I was crazy, that I was paranoid. That age was affecting me. They would make me doubt my own sanity. No, I would not give them that satisfaction. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I got up from the bed. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with cold water. I fixed my makeup as best I could. I combed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror again, and this time the woman who returned my gaze was different. I was still broken inside. I still felt that unbearable pain. But now there was something else in my eyes. Determination, contained rage, a purpose that was beginning to take shape. If Richard could act for 40 years, I could act for 2 months. If he could fake love, I could fake ignorance. If he could plan my destruction in silence, I could plan my revenge the same way. I picked up the gift from the floor. I hid it in the back of the closet. Richard did not deserve it. No one in that house deserved anything from me. But they did not know that yet. I went down the stairs slowly. My legs were still shaking, but I managed to keep my balance. I entered the kitchen where I had left dinner prepared. The candles were still on the table. The nice china was set. Everything looked perfect for an anniversary celebration. How ironic. Celebrating 40 years of a lie. Jessica was in the living room looking at her phone. When she saw me enter, she looked up and smiled at me. That fake smile that I could now see with total clarity. "Aunt Maggie, everything looks beautiful," she said with a sweet voice. "Richard is going to be very happy, Aunt Maggie." She called me aunt while planning to steal $50,000 from me, while betraying me under my own roof. "Thanks, Jess," I replied with the most normal voice I could manage. I wanted to do something special for tonight. 40 years is an incredible achievement, she continued. You two are an example of true love. True love. The words almost made me vomit, but I maintained my composure. I smiled. I acted my role of happy and naive wife just as they expected. "We have had our ups and downs like all couples," I said, "but we have always stayed together." "You can tell you love each other very much," insisted Jessica. "The way Uncle Richard looks at you, the way he treats you. It is obvious you are very important to him." Every word was a stab wound, but I did not allow myself to react. I just nodded and continued with my preparations as if nothing had happened. I heard Richard's car arrive, the sound of the garage door opening, his footsteps approaching. My heart began to beat faster, but not from excitement as before. Now it was from contained rage. The front door opened, and there he was, Richard Lawson, my husband of 40 years. The man who had just destroyed my life without even being present. He had flowers in his hands, a bouquet of red roses that probably cost $20. $20 while he planned to steal $500,000 from me. "My love," he said with that soft voice I believed was sincere. He approached and kissed me on the forehead, the same gesture I had imagined when I was hiding in the closet. Only now I knew it meant nothing. "Happy anniversary." "Happy anniversary," I replied. I managed to smile. I managed to hug him. I managed to act as if I did not know he had spent the last 20 minutes talking about how to destroy me. 40 years, he said, looking me in the eyes. 40 years by your side. You are the best thing that has happened to me in life, Margaret. Liar. Damn liar. The best thing that had happened to him was my money. Not me. Never me. You are also the best thing in my life, I lied. Two could play this game. Jessica appeared in the dining room. What pretty flowers, Uncle. Aunt Maggie deserves that and much more. Of course she does, replied Richard, hugging me around the waist. My wife deserves everything. The three of us had dinner. Richard and Jessica chatted animatedly. I participated as necessary. I smiled when I should smile. I laughed when they expected me to laugh. But my mind was elsewhere. I was calculating, planning, thinking about every step I had to take. Richard told me about his day. All lies, probably. He told me he had been thinking about me the whole time, that these 40 years had been wonderful, that he hoped for many more by my side. Jessica looked at us with feigned tenderness, as if witnessing our love gave her joy, as if she did not know it was all theater, as if she herself were not part of the play. When we finished dinner, Jessica retired to her room. Richard and I were left alone. He took my hand. Come upstairs with me, he told me. I have something for you. We went up the stairs. We entered the bedroom. The same room where everything had started hours before. The closet still had the door ajar. The place where my life changed forever. Richard took a small box out of his jacket. He opened it. Inside was a necklace, silver with a heart-shaped pendant. It probably cost $100. Nothing compared to what he planned to steal from me. For you, he said, putting the necklace on me. Because you are the love of my life. I let him put it on me. I felt the cold metal against my skin. A necklace bought with my own money to maintain the charade. It is beautiful, I said. Thank you. We went to bed. He hugged me. I remained still, feeling the weight of his arm on my body, the same body that gave him repulsion, the same body he had endured for 40 years, just for money. I love you, Margaret, he whispered in my ear. I love you too, I lied in the darkness. I waited for him to fall asleep. I heard his breathing become heavy and irregular. Only then did I allow myself to cry in silence, tears falling on the pillow without making a noise. But among those tears, there was something more than pain. There was a promise I made to myself that night. I was not going to be the victim of this story. I was going to be the one to write the ending. I did not sleep that night. I stayed awake while Richard snored beside me as if he had no care in the world, as if he had not just planned my total ruin. I watched the ceiling in the darkness, and my mind began to travel backward, toward all those years I believed were real, toward all those moments that were now revealed as perfectly constructed lies. I remembered the day I met Richard. It was at an art gallery downtown. I was 42 years old and had just buried my father. My mother had died 2 years earlier. I spent my entire youth caring for them. While my friends went out dancing, I was home giving medicines and taking them to medical appointments. While they got married and had children, I changed adult diapers and hired nurses. I do not regret caring for my parents. I loved them with all my heart, and it was an honor to be with them until the end. But when they left, I found myself alone in a house that was too big, with money in the bank that I had inherited, with properties in my name, but without anyone to share my life with. I was 42 years old and felt finished. All my acquaintances already had established families. I did not even have a date in my recent history. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had aged caring for others. A woman who had sacrificed her own happiness to fulfill her duty. My sister Barbara insisted that I go out, meet people, not stay locked in my sadness. It was she who convinced me to go to that art exhibition. I did not want to. I felt out of place. But I went because I needed to get out of that house full of memories. And there was Richard, standing in front of a landscape painting, well-dressed, handsome, with that gray hair that gave him a distinguished air. He was 45 years old back then. He smiled at me when our eyes met. A smile that made me feel things I had not felt in years. He approached to talk to me. He asked for my opinion on the paintings. He listened with attention when I answered. He made me laugh with his comments. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I felt interesting. I felt alive. Now I know it was all calculated. That he already knew who I was. That he had investigated my family, my inheritance, my situation. That smile was planned. That those words were designed specifically to conquer me. After the gallery, we went for coffee. We talked for hours. Richard told me he was a business consultant, that he had been widowed 3 years ago, that he also felt alone and was looking for companionship. He told me it was difficult to find someone genuine at our age, that most people were only looking for interest. How ironic, him telling me that while that was exactly what he was doing. He courted me for 6 months, flowers every week, dinners at elegant restaurants that I paid for without realizing it, walks in the park, long conversations about life and the future. He made me feel special. He made me believe that I had finally found someone who loved me for who I was. He proposed to me in my own house. He got down on one knee in the living room where I am now sitting remembering. He took out a simple but pretty ring. He told me he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, that I was the woman he had been waiting for, that together we could be happy. I cried with joy. I accepted without hesitation. I thought God was finally rewarding me for all those years of sacrifice. I thought my life was finally truly beginning. We got married 3 months later. A small but elegant wedding. My sister Barbara was there. Some friends. Richard's family, who I now know were probably aware of the plan. Everyone smiling. Everyone congratulating me. Everyone knowing the truth except me. The first years were good. Or at least that is what I thought. Richard was attentive. He accompanied me to family gatherings. We had dinner together every night. We slept hugging each other. I thought I finally had what I had always wanted. A partner. A husband. Someone who would grow old with me. But now that I look back with this new perspective, I see all the signs I ignored. All the red flags I decided not to see because I was too happy not to be alone. I remembered the first time Richard asked me about my finances. It was around the 3rd month of marriage. We were having breakfast, and he casually mentioned that it would be good for us to know each other's economic situation, that marriages failed due to a lack of financial transparency. It seemed reasonable to me. I showed him my bank statements. I told him about the properties I had inherited. I told him about the import business I managed with my sister. I saw the gleam in his eyes when I mentioned the figures. At that moment I interpreted it as pride, as if he were impressed that his wife was a successful woman. Now I know it was greed. It was confirmation that his investment of time was worth it. I remembered how he insisted I put him as a beneficiary on my life insurance. He said we were a family now, that if something happened to me he should be protected. It seemed logical to me. After all, if something happened to him, I would also want to be protected. I signed the papers without reading the fine print. I remembered the times he asked me to sign documents. He always had a reasonable explanation, that it was to facilitate banking procedures, that it was to expedite utility payments, that it was to be able to handle matters in case I was sick or absent. I signed. I trusted. I never imagined I was signing my own destruction. I remembered how he convinced me to sell one of the properties I inherited from my parents. He said we could invest the money better, that property required a lot of maintenance, that it was smarter to have liquidity. We sold the property for $120,000. Richard suggested putting the money in an investment account in his name to take advantage of better rates. I accepted. I never saw that money again. I remembered his subtle comments that made me feel less. When I gained weight, he told me I should take better care of myself. When I dressed up a lot, he asked me who I was getting pretty for. When I expressed my opinion about something, he corrected me as if I didn't know what I was talking about. Little blows to my self-esteem that accumulated over the years. I remembered the nights he arrived late, his explanations of business meetings that ran long, dinners with important clients, urgent projects that required his attention. I believed him. I prepared his plate and left it in the oven. I waited up for him, even if it was midnight. When he arrived smelling of woman's perfume, I believed him that he had been at a work dinner where women were present. Now I know he was probably with Ashley, with that 38-year-old woman who was his true partner, who shared his bed twice a week while I slept alone, believing my husband was working hard for our future. I remembered how my relationship with Barbara cooled over the years. She never completely trusted Richard. She told me once, years ago, She told me there was something about him she didn't like, that she felt he wasn't genuine. I got upset. I defended my husband. I told her she was jealous of my happiness. Barbara pulled away to not fight with me. We stopped seeing each other as much. The business we managed together was now run more by her than me. Richard had subtly isolated me from my sister, from my few friends, from anyone who could make me question things. He had turned me into an island where he was the only inhabitant besides me. I remembered when Jessica came to live with us 2 years ago. Richard explained to me that his niece was going through a difficult time, that she needed help, that we were family and we should support her. I accepted immediately. I have always been generous. I have always believed in helping. Jessica settled into the guest room. She ate our food, used our utilities, lived under our roof without paying anything. I treated her with affection. I prepared her favorite dishes. I asked her how her day had been. I considered her part of my family. And all this time she was working with Richard to rob me. $50,000 was her payment for betraying me, for spying, for helping to manipulate me, for being an accomplice to my destruction. The tears rolled down my cheeks again in the darkness of the room. But this time, they were not only of sadness. There was rage mixed in there. There was indignation. There was a fire growing stronger and stronger. 40 years of my life. 40 years I would never get back. 40 years believing in a love that never existed. 40 years being used, manipulated, deceived by a man who only saw dollars when he looked at me. I thought about all the things I sacrificed for this marriage, the opportunities I let pass, the trips I didn't take because Richard always had an excuse, the friendships I lost because he didn't approve of them, the dreams I abandoned because he convinced me they weren't realistic. I thought about my body, in the times I gave myself to him believing we were making love. Now I knew that for him it was just an obligation, something he had to endure to maintain the charade. It disgusted me. It disgusted me to think that I shared my intimacy with someone who felt repulsion for me. I thought about the money, the $500,000 he planned to steal from me. Money my parents earned with effort. Money I earned working honestly. Money he was going to use to finance his life with another woman. To buy a beach house for Ashley. To travel with her while I was left with nothing. I looked at Richard asleep beside me. He snored lightly with his mouth slightly open. He looked peaceful, without worries. Like someone sleeping with a clear conscience, I felt the urge to wake him, to scream everything I had heard at him, to demand explanations, to make him face his betrayal, but I didn't. Because screaming wasn't going to change anything. Confronting him now would only put me at a disadvantage. He would have time to prepare, to hide evidence, to manipulate the situation in his favor, as he had done for 40 years. No. I was going to play this game differently. I was going to use his own strategy against him. Patience, planning, perfect acting. If he could fake it for 40 years, I could fake it for 2 months. The following days were the hardest of my life. Having to wake up every morning next to Richard, having to smile at him, having to act as if nothing had happened. Every gesture of affection he gave me was like poison in my veins. Every sweet word he said turned my stomach. But I endured it. I became an actress in my own life. We had breakfast together, and I asked him about his plans for the day. He told me lies, and I feigned interest. Jessica came down to the kitchen, and the 3 of us chatted like a normal family, as if I didn't know they both planned to destroy me. A week after the anniversary, Richard mentioned the notary thing. We were having dinner when he brought up the subject casually. "My love, I need you to accompany me on Friday to sign some documents," he said while cutting his meat. My heart raced, but I maintained my composure. "What documents?" I asked with a calm voice. "It is to renew some insurance and update banking information. Nothing important. I just need your signature on a few things." The power of attorney. Exactly as he had planned. The document that would take control of everything from me. "Sure," I replied, smiling. "What time is the appointment?" "At 10 in the morning. It won't take much time." "Perfect. I'll be there." Richard smiled at me, satisfied. He probably thought everything was going according to his plan, that I was as naive as ever, that I would sign my own ruin without even reading what put my name on it. But what he didn't know was that I also had a plan. That same night, when Richard went out supposedly to a business meeting, I took my phone and looked through my contacts. I needed help. I needed someone who knew about laws, someone I could trust completely. I thought of my sister Barbara, but dismissed the idea. This would involve her too much, and I needed to keep her protected. I thought of some friends, but none had the legal knowledge I required. Then I remembered Arthur Sterling. He was the lawyer who had helped my parents with their wills years ago. A serious, professional man, about 50 years old. He was always honest and direct. My father trusted him completely. I looked for his card in my desk. I dialed his number with trembling hands. "Sterling Law, good evening," a male voice answered. "Good evening. This is Margaret Lawson speaking. I need to speak with attorney Arthur Sterling. It is urgent. It's me, Mrs. Lawson. I remember you perfectly. How can I help you?" His voice gave me peace of mind. I took a deep breath before continuing. "I need to see you as soon as possible. But it has to be in absolute secrecy. No one can know I spoke with you, not even my husband." There was silence on the other end. Then Arthur spoke with a serious tone. "I understand. Are you in immediate danger?" "Not physically, but I am in a very serious situation. Can I come to your office tomorrow? I have an opening at 2 in the afternoon. I'll be there. Thank you, counselor." "Calm down, Mrs. Lawson. We'll talk calmly tomorrow." I hung up the phone, feeling like I was finally taking control of the situation. I was no longer just a victim, hiding in a closet listening to her own destruction. Now I was someone who was acting, someone who was fighting. The next day I told Richard I was going shopping with a friend. He didn't even ask for details. He just nodded absently while looking at his phone, probably messaging Ashley. I took my car and drove to Arthur's firm. The office was downtown, in an old but well-maintained building. I went up to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door with the sign that said his name. Arthur received me personally. He showed me into his private office. He closed the door and the curtains. He sat across from me with a serious expression. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Lawson. And don't worry. Everything you tell me is protected by attorney-client privilege." And then I told him. I told him about the anniversary, about hiding in the closet, about the speakerphone call, about every horrible word I heard, about Richard, Jessica, and Ashley, about the 40 years of lies, about the plan to steal everything from me. Arthur listened without interrupting. He took notes occasionally. His expression became graver with every detail I revealed. When I finished speaking, I felt exhausted. I cried during parts of my story. Arthur passed me tissues without saying anything. He waited for me to calm down. "Mrs. Lawson," he said finally with a firm voice, "what you just told me is very serious. We are talking about marriage fraud, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, and possibly other crimes. I know. That is why I need your help. On Friday, Richard wants me to sign a power of attorney. I know that is the next step in his plan." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "Do not sign anything. Absolutely nothing. Not even if he insists or gets upset. But if I refuse, he will suspect. He will know I discovered something." "You are right." Arthur stood thinking for a few seconds. "Then we will go to that appointment. But I will be there too. I will call the notary and explain the situation confidentially. The notary will have instructions not to process any document you sign that day. It will be just to keep up the charade." "You can do that." "I can and I will. In the meantime, we need to act fast. We are going to protect your assets immediately." Arthur took out a notebook and began making a list. "I need you to bring me all your documents, property deeds, bank statements, insurance policies, business contracts with your sister, everything that has your name or where Richard appears as a beneficiary. I have them in a safe in my house. Bring them to me tomorrow. I also need you to record everything you can. If Richard or Jessica talk about the plan again, record it. Any evidence will be useful. I can record without them knowing. In this case, yes, it is to protect yourself from fraud. Legally, we can use those recordings." I felt relieved. I finally had an ally, someone who would help me fight. "What else should I do, counselor?" "Act normal. Do not change your behavior. Continue being the trusting wife Richard expects. Meanwhile, I will prepare everything for when the time comes to act." "And when will that time be?" Arthur looked me straight in the eyes. "When we have all the necessary proof, when we are sure nothing escapes us. And then, Mrs. Lawson, the full weight of the law will fall on them. I left that office feeling different, still hurt, still betrayed, but no longer helpless. The war was just beginning. The following days I became a spy inside my own house. I carried my phone with me all the time with the recorder ready. I watched every move of Richard and Jessica. I mentally noted every suspicious conversation. Every gesture I ignored before now had a new meaning. I brought all the documents to Arthur as he asked. I left the house with the excuse of going to the beauty salon and spent 3 hours in his office reviewing papers. What we discovered left me frozen. Richard had been moving money from my accounts for years. Small amounts I never noticed. $500 here, $1,000 there. Transfers that added up to almost $80,000. All under the pretext of investments that never existed. "This man is a professional," said Arthur, reviewing the statements. "He has been draining your resources slowly so you wouldn't notice. Can I recover that money? We can try. But first, we need to secure what you still have. I'm going to prepare documents to freeze your accounts and protect your properties. When I have them ready, you will sign them and we will register them. Richard won't be able to touch anything else." Arthur also investigated Ashley. It turned out the apartment where she lived was rented in the name of a shell company. A company Richard had created using money from my accounts. My own money was paying for my husband's love nest with his mistress. "I have a trusted private investigator," Arthur told me. "With your authorization, I will put him to follow Richard. We need photographic evidence of his relationship with this woman. Do it. I need proof of everything." Friday arrived. The day of the appointment with the notary. I dressed carefully that morning. I put on a simple and elegant dress. Richard was waiting for me in the living room, looking satisfied. He probably thought that in a few hours he would have total control over my life. "Ready, my love?" he asked, offering me his arm. "Ready," I replied, taking it. On the outside, I looked like an obedient wife. On the inside, my gut was twisting with disgust. We arrived at the notary's office. Richard had chosen a place far from downtown, a notary he had probably paid to turn a blind eye to irregularities. But what Richard didn't know was that Arthur had already spoken with that notary. He had explained the situation to him. He had warned him about the legal consequences of processing fraudulent documents. The notary, scared of losing his license, had agreed to cooperate. We entered the office. The notary received us with professionalism. Richard smiled confidently. I maintained my mask of naivety. "Mrs. Lawson, Mr. Lawson, please take a seat," said the notary. We sat down. The notary took out several documents. "I am going to explain to you what you are going to sign today," began the notary, looking directly at me. "This is a broad power of attorney that would give Mr. Lawson complete authority over your assets and bank accounts. Are you sure you want to proceed with this?" Richard tensed slightly. He probably didn't expect the notary to be so direct. "Of course she is sure," intervened Richard quickly. "We already discussed it. It is just to facilitate paperwork." The notary ignored him and kept looking at me. "Mrs. Lawson, I need to hear from you directly. Do you understand the implications of this document?" I saw my opportunity. I could say no right there. I could unmask Richard in front of the notary, but I remembered Arthur's words. Maintain the charade. Do not raise suspicions yet. "I understand," I said with a soft voice. "I trust my husband completely." I signed the documents. Richard did too. The notary stamped everything with a neutral expression. Richard left there radiant. He thought he had won. What he didn't know was that those documents would never be registered. The notary would keep them as evidence. Meanwhile, Arthur had already processed other documents that protected my assets. Real documents that did have legal validity. In the car back home, Richard could not hide his satisfaction. "You see, my love, it was very simple. Now everything is in order." "Yes," I replied, looking out the window. "Everything is in order." That night, while Richard was showering, I heard his phone ring. It was on the bed. I picked it up and saw the name on the screen. Ashley. My hand shook, but I answered. I imitated Richard's voice as best I could with a low tone. "Yes, my love. It is finally Friday," said a cheerful female voice. "Are you coming tonight? I made your favorite food." I hung up immediately. My hands were sweating. I had just heard the voice of the woman sharing my husband. The woman who would receive all my money. The woman who would enjoy the life Richard had stolen from me. I put the phone back in its place, just as Richard came out of the bathroom. "Who called?" he asked, seeing the missed call notification. "I don't know." It rang, but I didn't reach it in time to answer. Richard checked his phone, and I saw his expression change slightly. "It is a client. I have to go meet with him. I'm going to be late tonight." "On a Friday?" I asked, trying to sound disappointed instead of furious. "I am sorry, my love. It is urgent. I won't be long." I watched him get ready. Put on his expensive cologne, the one I had given him for his birthday. He was getting ready for her using what I had given him. "Have a good time," I told him, when he said goodbye with a kiss on the forehead. "I'll be back soon." "I love you." Liar, damn liar. As soon as I heard his car drive away, I called Arthur. "Counselor, Richard just left. He is probably going to Ashley's." "Perfect. My investigator is ready. He will follow him and document everything. I need to see the photos when you have them." "Mrs. Lawson, I don't know if that is a good idea. It could be very painful for you." "I need to see them. I need to see with my own eyes the magnitude of his betrayal." Arthur sighed on the other end. "All right, I will show them to you when we have them." That night, Jessica came down to the living room where I was sitting. "Aunt Maggie, are you okay? You look pale." "I am fine, Jess. Just a little tired." "Uncle Richard went out." "Yes. A work meeting." Jessica smiled smugly. She knew perfectly well where Richard was. She probably knew everything about Ashley. And there she was, sitting across from me, feigning concern. "It must be hard that he works so much," she said with fake compassion. "But he is a very dedicated man." Dedicated. Dedicated to robbing me. Dedicated to deceiving me. Dedicated to destroying me. "Yes," I replied. "He is very dedicated." I went to sleep alone that night. Richard arrived past 2 in the morning. I heard him enter stealthily. I pretended to be asleep when he got into bed, smelling of woman's perfume. The next day, Arthur called me early. "Mrs. Lawson, we have the photos. You can come to the office." I went immediately. Arthur was waiting for me with a folder on his desk. I sat in front of him and took a deep breath. "Are you sure you want to see them?" he asked once more. "Show them to me." He opened the folder. There they were. Photos of Richard entering a building. Photos of him hugging a blonde woman on the balcony. Photos of them kissing. Photos of them having dinner together. Photos that confirmed everything I already knew but that still broke my soul. I looked at every photo carefully. The woman was young and pretty. Richard looked at her with a tenderness he had never given me. In 40 years, he never looked at me like that. "There is more," said Arthur, taking out another envelope. "The investigator found documents, rental contracts for the apartment, receipts for expensive gifts Richard has bought her, all paid with money from your accounts." He showed me invoices. A $5,000 necklace, a trip to Cancun for $15,000, designer clothes, dinners at exclusive restaurants. My money used to support his mistress. "How much has he spent in total on her?" I asked with a trembling voice. Arthur reviewed his notes. "In the last 4 years, approximately $120,000. $120,000, while I saved and watched every expense, while I tried to be a good wife, while I slept alone waiting for him. He spent my money on another woman." "We have enough evidence," said Arthur, closing the folder. "We can act whenever you are ready." I looked at those photos once more. I looked at Richard happy with Ashley. I looked at the life he really wanted. The life I was never part of. "Not yet," I said, wiping my tears. "I want him to fall harder. I want him to lose everything like he planned for me to lose everything." Arthur nodded understandingly. "Then we will continue gathering evidence. And when the moment comes, Mrs. Lawson, I assure you justice will fall on him with all its weight." I left that office more determined than ever. The pain was turning into fuel. The betrayal was turning into strength. Richard didn't know who he had messed with. He would soon find out. I returned home after seeing those photos with a broken heart, but a mind clearer than ever. Richard was in the living room, reading the newspaper. He smiled at me when I entered, as if nothing, as if the night before he hadn't been in the arms of another woman, as if he wasn't robbing me systematically. "How did it go, my love?" he asked with that sweet voice that now provoked nausea in me. "Good. I just went for some routine medical tests. You should take better care of yourself. We aren't young anymore." We aren't young anymore. How ironic, coming from a man who had a lover 24 years younger than me. A man who found me repulsive, but slept with a 38-year-old woman. You are right, I replied, sitting next to him. I should take better care of myself. The following days I dedicated myself to observing everything with new eyes. Every detail that went unnoticed before now had meaning. I analyzed every conversation between Richard and Jessica, looking for clues. Every time Richard went out, I documented the time and the reason he gave. Arthur had given me a small recording device that looked like a pen. I carried it with me all the time. I recorded conversations during dinners. I recorded casual comments Richard made, anything that could serve as evidence. One afternoon, while cleaning Richard's study, I found something. I was putting away some books when I saw a folder hidden behind other documents. I pulled it out carefully. Inside were papers that made me shake. They were drafts of a detailed plan. Specific dates, exact amounts, properties listed with their estimated values, bank accounts with their balances. Everything was there. My life reduced to numbers and timelines. There was a note handwritten by Richard. It said, June 15, sign power of attorney. July 1, start transfers. August 15, sell coastal property. September 1, final liquidation. September 15, leave the country. September 15. That was the date he planned to abandon me. 3 months were left. 3 months to execute his perfect plan and disappear with all my money. I photographed every page of that folder with my phone. Then I returned it exactly where I found it. Richard couldn't know I had discovered his calendar of destruction. I sent the photos to Arthur immediately. He called me in less than 10 minutes. Mrs. Lawson, this is pure gold. It is evidence of premeditation. It proves everything was planned in advance. A judge is going to want to see this. What do we do now? We keep gathering proof. Meanwhile, I am going to prepare a full lawsuit. Marriage fraud, misappropriation, conspiracy. When we present all this, Richard won't know what hit him. That night during dinner, Richard was particularly cheerful. Jessica also seemed in a good mood. The two chatted about a trip they were planning to take. I was thinking, said Richard, pouring himself more wine, that we should take a vacation in September. You and I alone. Like a second honeymoon. Second honeymoon. In September, the same month he planned to rob me of everything and flee with Ashley. He had the nerve to plan one last trip with me, probably to distract me while finalizing his paperwork. It sounds beautiful, I replied, smiling. Where were you thinking we go? Maybe to the coast. We could stay at our property there. Enjoy the beach. Relax. Our property. The same one that, according to his plan, he intended to sell in August. It probably wouldn't even be ours by the time September arrived. Sounds perfect, I lied. We haven't gone in years. Jessica watched us with that fake smile I could now see clearly. How nice that after so many years you still make time for yourselves, she commented. True love needs to be taken care of, said Richard, taking my hand across the table. Margaret is the most important thing in my life. His words were like knives. Every lie that came out of his mouth made me stronger, made me more determined to destroy him, as he planned to destroy me. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was my sister Barbara. Maggie, I need to talk to you. Can we meet? Alone, without Richard. Her tone worried me. Sure. Is something wrong? I prefer to tell you in person. Can you come to my house tomorrow? I went the next day. Barbara received me with a serious expression. She made me sit in her living room and served me tea. Maggie, I am going to be direct. A few days ago, someone contacted me asking about the business finances. About your share specifically. About how much your part is worth. My heart raced. Who asked? He didn't give his name but said he worked with Richard, that you two were considering some investments and he needed information. Richard, investigating the value of my share of the business. Another piece of his plan. What did you tell him? Nothing. I told him that information was confidential, but I stayed worried. Maggie. Something is happening. I looked at my sister, the only blood family I had left. The person who had always distrusted Richard. The one who tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. And then I told her everything. Every detail. From the night in the closet to the photos with Ashley. From the theft plan to the September date. everything. Barbara listened to me, with her eyes getting wider and wider. When I finished, she was pale. "That bastard," she said with a trembling voice. "That son of a bitch. Maggie, you have to report him now. You have to get him out of your house. I am going to do it. But it has to be at the right moment. I need to make sure he doesn't escape, that he pays for everything. What do you need from me? Help me protect my share of the business. I need you to do whatever is necessary legally so Richard cannot touch it. I will do it. I will speak with our business lawyer today." Barbara hugged me tight. "Forgive me, sister. Forgive me for not insisting more years ago. Forgive me for pulling away when you defended that man. It is not your fault. I chose not to see. I chose to believe his lies. But no more. Now that man is going to pay. I promise you." I left Barbara's house feeling less alone. I had Arthur on my side. I had my sister. I had solid evidence. I had a plan. The following days I continued my perfect acting. Richard never suspected anything. He kept treating me with that fake affection. He kept planning his escape while I planned his downfall. One night, Richard received a call that made him nervous. I saw him go out to the balcony to talk in private. But I had learned to be stealthy. I approached the balcony door without him seeing me. He had left it slightly ajar. I activated the recorder on my phone. "No, not yet," Richard was saying, with a tense voice. "There is a month left still. I need you to be patient." Silence while he listened to the other person. "I know I promised you it would be soon. I know you want us to leave, but I need to make sure everything is perfect. We cannot risk something going wrong now." More silence. "The money is almost ready. I already have access to the main accounts. I just need to transfer it to secure accounts and sell the properties." It was Ashley on the other end. She was pressuring him. "I love you too. Of course I miss you. But think of the future we are going to have. $500,000, my love. We can live wherever we want. We can do whatever we want. I just need one more month. $500,000. There was the exact figure. The price of 40 years of my life. Yes. Book the tickets for mid-September. To Europe. We will start our new life there. Europe. He planned to flee to another continent, where I could never find him, where the money would be safe in international accounts. I have to hang up. Margaret is inside. She cannot hear me. I quickly returned to the living room and sat down as if I had never moved. Richard entered minutes later, looking more relaxed. "Who was it?" I asked with a casual voice. "A client. Nothing important. Lie after lie after lie." That night, when Richard fell asleep, I reviewed the recording. It was perfect. His voice clear, his incriminating words. Another piece of evidence. I sent it to Arthur along with a message. "We almost have everything. When do we act?" His answer arrived in the morning. "Soon. Very soon. I am preparing something special. Something Richard will never forget." I smiled reading that. My husband thought he was the master of deception. He thought he was the smartest. He thought he had planned the perfect crime. But he didn't know that the woman he considered dumb and easy to manipulate now held all the cards in her hand. He didn't know that every step he took brought him closer to his own destruction. September was his deadline. But I had other plans. Plans that would involve witnesses, authorities, real consequences. The trap was almost ready. It just lacked the perfect moment to spring it, and that moment was closer than Richard imagined. Arthur summoned me to his office a week later. When I arrived, there was another person with him. A man of about 45 years, dressed in a formal suit. "Mrs. Lawson, may I introduce District Attorney Thomas Reed. I have been working with him on your case." The DA extended his hand with a serious expression. "Mrs. Lawson, I have reviewed all the evidence Attorney Sterling presented to me. We have a very solid case. Marriage fraud, misappropriation of funds, conspiracy to commit fraud. Your husband and his accomplice could face serious criminal charges." I sat down feeling that finally everything was taking shape. "What follows now?" Arthur leaned forward. "We are going to organize something. In 2 weeks your sister Barbara has a birthday, correct?" "Yes, July 28th. Perfect. We are going to organize a celebration dinner at her house. We will invite Richard, Jessica, and a few more people. It will be the perfect setting." "The setting for what?" DA Reed replied. to confront them with the evidence in front of witnesses, so they cannot deny anything, so they see that their plan failed completely. Arthur took out some documents. Meanwhile, I need you to sign these papers. They are protection orders for your assets. From this moment on, Richard will not be able to touch a cent of your money. All accounts are frozen for him. The properties are legally protected. I signed every document feeling immense relief. Finally, my assets were safe. Richard might have access on paper, but legally he couldn't do anything anymore. I have also prepared this, continued Arthur, handing me another folder. It is a complete divorce petition, with grounds of fraud, deceit, and misappropriation. It is ready to be filed the day of the dinner. Divorce. The word I never thought would apply to my marriage. 40 years ending, not because of differences or falling out of love, but because of calculated betrayal. And Jessica? I asked. For her, we have charges of complicity and fraud. The $50,000 Richard promised her can be considered payment for participation in criminal activity. She will also face consequences. I left that meeting feeling prepared. The plan was in motion. I just needed to maintain my act for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks pretending to be the naive wife while the trap closed around Richard and Jessica. I returned home and found Richard reviewing papers in the study, papers that probably had to do with his plan. He saw me enter and quickly put them away. My love, where were you? I went to see Barbara. We were planning a dinner for her birthday. Do you want to celebrate at her house? Obviously, you two are invited. I saw a gleam in his eyes. He probably thought it would be another opportunity to act like the perfect husband in front of my family. Of course we will go. Barbara is important to you. Barbara, the sister he had distanced me from. The sister who always saw what I refused to see. The dinner will be on the 28th, a Saturday night. We will be there. The following days were the hardest, knowing the end was near, but having to keep acting. Waking up every morning next to a man who disgusted me. Sharing the table with Jessica knowing she had betrayed me for money. But I did it. I smiled when I should smile. I spoke when I should speak. I maintained the perfect charade. Richard was increasingly confident. One afternoon I heard him talking to Jessica in the garden. I approached without them seeing me and activated my recorder. Almost there, Jess, Richard was saying with an excited voice. In a month I will be out of the country with all the money, and you will have your $50,000 to start your business. I cannot believe you actually achieved it, Uncle. 40 years, and she never suspected a thing. Because she is dumb, always was. So desperate for love she never saw reality. So in need of company she accepted anything. Every word was a blow, but they didn't hurt me like before. Now they only fueled my determination. And is Ashley ready? Asked Jessica. More than ready. She already has everything packed. She already has her passport ready. She is just waiting for me to tell her it is time to leave. She must love you to have waited 4 years. Richard laughed. She loves me as much as I love Margaret's money. Ashley knows that when we get out of here we will live well, very well. That is what matters to her. So not even Ashley really loved him. She was just there for the money he promised her. How ironic. The man who used me for money was being used the same way. What do you think Margaret will do when she realizes? Asked Jessica. By the time she realizes, it will be too late. She will be ruined, alone, without money, without properties, without dignity. She will probably end up living off her sister's charity. How sad, said Jessica, without sounding sad at all. But well, she had 40 years of company. That must be worth something. They both laughed. Their laughter went through me, but it didn't break me. They couldn't break me anymore. I was already too strong for that. I saved that recording too. Another piece of evidence. Another proof of his cruelty. Finally, July 28th arrived. The day of the dinner at Barbara's house. I dressed carefully that afternoon. I put on an elegant green dress. I did my makeup. I did my hair. I wanted to look good for this moment. I wanted Richard to see me strong when his world crumbled. You look beautiful, said Richard when I came down the stairs. Lie number 1000, thank you. I want Barbara to have a nice celebration. Jessica was also ready. She wore a red dress. She smiled without knowing that in a few hours that smile would disappear forever. We arrived at Barbara's house at 7 in the evening. My sister received me with a tight hug. Ready? she whispered in my ear. Ready, I replied. The house was decorated elegantly. There were several people already present. I recognized some of Barbara's friends. What Richard and Jessica didn't know was that Arthur, District Attorney Reed, and 2 plainclothes police officers were also present. We had dinner. The food was delicious. Richard and Jessica chatted animatedly. They acted their role of a united family. Richard held my hand occasionally. He smiled at me with that falseness I now saw so clearly. After dinner, Barbara asked for attention. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me, she said, raising her glass. But tonight we are not only celebrating my birthday, we are also going to celebrate something more important. The truth. Richard looked at me confused. Jessica frowned. Arthur stood up from his chair. D.A. Reed did the same. Mr. Richard Lawson, said the D.A. with an official voice, we have some questions to ask you. I saw the color drain from Richard's face. How his eyes moved, looking for an exit. What is this? He asked, trying to sound calm. I stood up from my chair. All eyes were on me. This, Richard, is the end of your plan. And the beginning of your punishment. Arthur put a laptop on the table. He pressed play. On the screen appeared the video the private investigator had taken. Richard entering Ashley's apartment. Richard kissing her. Richard with her on the balcony talking about their future together. What the hell is this, Margaret? Shouted Richard, standing up abruptly. It is the truth, I replied with a firm voice. The truth I heard the night of our anniversary. The truth I have been documenting for weeks. The truth that destroys your perfect plan. Jessica tried to stand up, but one of the agents stood behind her. Sit down, Miss Miller ordered the agent. D.A. Reed began to speak. Mr. Lawson, we have evidence that you entered into marriage with Mrs. Lawson with the premeditated intention of appropriating her assets. We have recordings of conversations where you admit having faked love for 40 years. We have documents showing unauthorized transfers of funds. We have proof that you plan to leave the country with fraudulently obtained money. Arthur put more documents on the table. We also have this, he said, showing the folder I found in Richard's study. Your own plan written in your own handwriting. Dates, amounts, strategies, everything documented by yourself. Richard was pale. He looked at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. This is a misunderstanding, he tried to say. Margaret is confused. She is misinterpreting things. Misinterpreting? I asked, feeling the rage rise. Did I misunderstand when you say I repulse you? Did I misunderstand when you plan to steal $500,000 from me? Did I misunderstand when you talk about fleeing to Europe with your mistress? I put the recorder on the table. I pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room. She is dumb. Always was. So desperate for love she never saw reality. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard couldn't deny his own voice, his own words, his own cruelty exposed in front of everyone. Jessica began to cry. I didn't know, she tried to say. I didn't know it was so serious. You, Miss Miller, said the DA, accepted $50,000 to participate in this fraud. That makes you an accomplice. Arthur approached me and handed me an envelope. Mrs. Lawson, these are the divorce papers. They are already signed by you. They just need to be filed officially, which we will do tomorrow morning. I looked Richard straight in the eyes. 40 years, Richard. 40 years you stole from me. But you are not going to steal one more day. Richard tried to approach me, but the agent stopped him. Margaret, please, he pleaded with a desperate voice. We can talk. We can fix this. Everything has an explanation. The only explanation I need, I already have, I replied with a firm voice. 40 years of lies. 40 years of usage. 40 years of theft. That is your explanation. D.A. Reed stood in front of Richard. Mr. Lawson, at this moment we are not arresting you, but I inform you that you will face criminal charges. Marriage fraud, misappropriation, conspiracy. I recommend you get a good lawyer, Arthur continued explaining while Richard collapsed in his chair. All bank accounts where you had access have been frozen. The transfers you made for years have been traced. You will have to return every cent. The properties are legally protected. You cannot sell anything. You cannot touch anything. The apartment you rented for your mistress will be evicted this very week. Furthermore, intervened the DA, we have a warrant to review all your financial activities of the last 10 years. If we find more irregularities, the charges will increase." Jessica cried inconsolably. "Uncle, you promised me nothing would happen. You told me it was legal, that we were just being smart." "Shut up, Jess," shouted Richard, completely losing his composure. Barbara approached me and took my hand. "I'm very proud of you, sister, very proud." I looked at Richard one last time. The man who had been my husband for 40 years, the man I trusted completely, the man who destroyed me without remorse. "There is something else you should know," I said with a calm voice. "Something we found when we investigated your finances." Arthur took out another document. "We discovered that Mr. Lawson has another identity, that he was married before under another name, that his previous wife also reported him for fraud, that he fled before facing charges, that you, Mrs. Lawson, were not his first victim. You were just the most profitable one." I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. He wasn't just a con man, he was a professional con man, a man who had done this before, who had probably done it several times. "How many more?" I asked with a broken voice. "How many more women did you destroy?" Richard didn't answer. He just looked at the floor defeated. The DA spoke. "We are in contact with authorities in other states. Apparently, there are at least 2 more cases similar to yours. Mature women with resources who were seduced, married, and robbed by this man using different identities. I wasn't special. I wasn't chosen for some reason. I was just another mark on his list. Another lonely woman with money who fell into his trap. But, unlike the others, I didn't let him escape." "Mr. Lawson," said the DA, "you have 72 hours to present yourself at my office with your lawyer. If you do not, we will issue an arrest warrant." "Understood," Richard nodded without looking up. The agents escorted Richard and Jessica out of the house. I watched them leave, knowing they would never return to my life again, that I would never have to fake again, that I would never have to act again. When they left, I collapsed in Barbara's arms. I cried. I cried for the lost years, for the betrayed trust, for the love that never existed, for the woman I was and who I would never be again. But I also cried with relief, because I had survived, because I had fought, because I had won. The following months were a legal whirlwind. Richard tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. His lawyers tried to negotiate, but the DA didn't budge. In December, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud and misappropriation. Jessica received 3 years of probation and had to return the $20,000 she had already received from Richard. Ashley disappeared. I never saw her again nor heard from her. She probably found another man with money to maintain her lifestyle. I recovered almost all my money. The $80,000 Richard had secretly transferred. The $120,000 he spent on Ashley. Not everything, but enough to rebuild my life. I sold the house where I lived with him. I couldn't stay there surrounded by fake memories. I bought a smaller but cozy apartment, a place that was completely mine. I got close to Barbara again. We rebuilt our relationship. The business we managed together began to prosper again. I learned to live alone, really alone. Not the desperate loneliness I felt at 42, but a chosen loneliness, a dignified loneliness. 2 years have passed since that night in the closet. 2 years since my life changed forever. Sometimes it still hurts. Sometimes I still ask myself how I could be so blind. But I don't blame myself anymore. I didn't do anything wrong. I loved truly. I trusted honestly. I was completely loyal. Richard was the one who lied. Richard was the one who betrayed. Richard was the one who stole. And Richard was the one who paid. Now I am 64 years old. Maybe I won't find another love. Maybe I will end my days alone. But it will be an honest loneliness, a life without lies, without deception, without masks. And that, after 40 years of falsehood, is worth more than any company. I am Margaret Lawson. I am 64 years old. And this is my story of how the woman they believed weak turned out to be the strongest of all.